In this video, I'd like to talk about converting percents to fractions. And this process will be very similar to the process of converting percents to decimals. Essentially, we're going to convert this first to some fraction over 100. Because remember that the word percent, we went over it in the video on converting decimals to, or percents to decimals, that the word percent literally just means to divide by 100. So when you see 16%, you can immediately just rewrite this as 16 divided by 100. So replacing the percent symbol with division by 100. So 16% is just 16 over 100. Or in the video when we converted percents to decimals, this is just 16 hundredths, which is 0.16. But for this video, we want to focus mainly on the fraction and then just simplifying it. Now, a lot of percents will just be some fraction over 100. They won't be able to simplify. But a lot of these percents, once they become a fraction, can be simplified and become a reduced fraction. So let's see if we can reduce the fraction 16 over 100. So we know 16% is just 16 over 100. And each of these numbers is divisible by 2. So we're going to cut them both in half. So let's divide top and bottom by 2 so that you get 8 over 50. And again, both of these numbers are even numbers, so let's divide them by 2 again, just to simplify this further. You get 4 over 25. Now 4/25 is fully simplified because the only number that goes into 4 is 2, but 2 does not go into 25. And regardless, the only number that goes into 25 is 5, and 5 does not go into 4. So this is as simple as we can make it. So 16% is equal to 4/25 as a fraction. Now let's try another one. Let's do 39%. And so just remembering that percent means to divide by 100. We'll write this as 39 over 100. And from here, since it's already a fraction, we'll just see if we can simplify it. And 13 is divisible by both 13 and 3. And those are the only numbers that divide into it if you look at its prime factorization. But 100 is only divisible by 2 and 5, or by 10. So there's no number that can divide into both of these, which means that this is actually fully simplified. And the way to really check is you have to look at their prime factorization, which is essentially what I did. But 39 is 3 and 13 as a prime factorization. And 100, which is 10 squared, is just 2 times 5 times 2 times 5. So once it's in its prime factorization, if you can't make cancellations with numbers on the top and the bottom, then this is actually fully simplified. So we can feel confident that that's the right answer because we looked at its prime factorization and we couldn't simplify it. So let's keep going on these. Let's say we have 10%. And 10% is just 10 divided by 100. So anytime you see percent, just write divided by 100. Now 10 divided by 100 can be simplified since both 10 and 100 are divisible by 10. So if we divide them each by 10, you get 1 over 10. And anytime you end up with 1, you know you're finished. So 1/10 would be the final fraction for 10%. So we can keep going with these. Let's say we have a single digit percent. Let's say we have 5%. And so we'll write this as 5 divided by 100. And both 5 and 100 are both evenly divisible by 5. So we can divide them each by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 5% is just 1 over 20. Now we can also look at, let's say, 2.3%. So this might be a little bit harder since we'll write this as 2.3 divided by 100. But we still have a decimal. So if you still have a decimal after rewriting this as a fraction, what you can do is just multiply by different powers of 10 to get rid of the decimal. So we have one decimal place. So if we multiplied by 10, that would give us 23. Since multiplying by 10, we essentially just move the decimal once. But we can't just multiply the top by 10 without changing the number. So you do the same on the bottom as well. So this becomes 23 over 1,000. And 23 over 1,000, this is our fractional form. We could see if we could simplify this, but 23 is a prime number. So it's not going to divide into 1,000 evenly, and there's no way to make 23 smaller. So this would actually be our final answer here. And likewise, if you had a problem where, let's say you had 4.16%, so you'd first write it by changing it to division over 100. So 4.16 divided by 100. And now we need to get rid of the decimals up here. So we're going to multiply by 100 this time, because we got to move the decimal place twice, so it needs to have 2 zeros after the 1. If we had to move the decimal place, let's say 7 times, then this would have to be a 1 followed by 7 zeros. And of course, you have to do the same to the bottom. So in the bottom, you get 10,000. And in the top, you just get 416. And from here, you can simplify this because that is an even number on the top and the bottom. So 416 cut in half would be 208, and you get 5,000 on the bottom. Now you can cut them each in half again. This becomes a 104 over 2,500. And again, just keep cutting them in half since we're dealing with even numbers. This would be 57, and this would be 1250. Now from here, it might be challenging, because for 57, that's just 19 times 3 if you look at its prime factorization. So if 3 goes into this, then you can simplify, or if 19 goes into this. But 3 does not go into this, because if you add the digits, 1 plus 2 plus 5, that's 8, and 3 does not go into 8. So if you were to look at this prime factorization, it's 125 times 10, and 125 is 5 to the third power. And then times 10, so times 5 times 2. So in the bottom here, you didn't have any 19s or any 3s. So this is actually fully simplified. So this was a fairly complicated one. You had to do a lot of simplification. But what we found is that this 4.16 is equal to 57 over 1250. And just one more example type so that you've seen it. If you have a number with percent bigger than 100, let's say you have 225%. The process is the same. You'll still write this with division by 100 and then try and simplify. So each of these numbers end in a 5 or a 0, so you can divide them each by 5. And so in the bottom, 100 divided by 5 is just 20. And 5 goes into 22 4 times. There's 2 left over. And 5 goes into 25 5 times. So you get 45 over 20. But each of these could again be divided by 5, since they both end in a 5 and a 0. So 45 over 5 is 9. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So 225% is the same as 9/4 when converted to a fraction.